News. Now let's get straight into the World Brief as we delve into some issues from all around the world. Of course, we begin in the United States. Trump mania is not going anywhere anytime soon. The Trump administration has deported over 200 alleged members of Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan gang, from the U.S., despite a court order forbidding it from doing so, saying in an extraordinary statement that a judge did not have the authority to block its actions. The gang is said to be linked to kidnapping, extortion, and contract killings. Well, the deportation operation followed a move by Judge James Boasberg to block President Trump's use of the Alien Enemies Act, wartime powers to rapidly deport the alleged gang members. In a Saturday evening hearing, Boasberg blocked the use of the law for 14 days, saying the statute refers to hostile acts perpetrated by another country that are commensurate to war. The judge also said during the hearing that any flights carrying migrants processed under the law should return to the U.S. But, of course, we know that this was of no consequence as the deportation went ahead, as we see in the videos that you're currently watching. Now, in a related development, as we're still speaking on immigration under Donald Trump, a memo listing 41 countries in 3 different categories being considered for visa bans is currently in circulation. So it's important to note that the list, which was originally published by the New York Times and features over 20 African countries, is still yet to be approved. Nevertheless, it has caused a lot of conversation around the direction that the Trump administration will be going in. Locally here in Nigeria, I know a lot of people were exhaling, and we're happy to see that Nigeria was not in any of the categories on that list. Well, still on U.S. international relations, South African Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool has been declared persona non grata by the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and so has been expelled from the country on accusations of hating America and hating Donald Trump. It's the latest salvo against South Africa, which has been in the administration's crosshairs since Trump took office in January. In a fiery post on X, on Friday, Secretary Rubio called Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool a race-baiting politician and said he was considered a persona non grata. Rubio's ire came after Rasool said in an online seminar hosted by a South African think tank that the MAGA movement was partially in response to worries about demographic change and a future when white Americans may no longer be the majority. Let's listen in.
Supremacist assault on incumbency. We see it in the domestic politics of the USA, the MAGA movement, the Make America Great Again movement, as a response, not simply to a supremacist instinct, but to very clear data that shows great demographic shifts in the USA, in which the voting electorate in the USA is projected to become 48% white, and that the possibility of a majority of minorities is looming on the horizon.
Well, South Africa has responded by calling the action regrettable, whilst ensuring that the nations could continue to build a mutually beneficial relationship. Now, Ambassador Rasool is an anti-apartheid activist, and he has been extremely vocal about support for Palestine, which is in line with South Africa's foreign policy. South African opposition parties have also weighed in, with Julius Malema's EFF threatening that they will make sure that the proposed U.S. envoy, who is Joel Pollak, will not have his credentials signed by the presidency. So this is all that has been unfolding through over the weekend concerning Trump and immigration.
All right, let me start on a very light note. When I heard the announcement, even though it hasn't been signed, of the countries who are restricted or partially restricted, of course, the first country I was looking for was whether Nigeria was on that list. Recall that when Trump had a similar restriction to certain countries, or like a red flag in his last administration, Nigeria was one of those countries. So it was quite refreshing to see. And I don't know if that speaks to our relationship, our foreign relationship with America. But that aside, I think, I can't remember who it was that pointed out, and you did as well, about that 20 African countries are on that list. And a lot of the countries that are there, aside from maybe Russia, a few other countries like that, have BME population, and that's black and minority ethnic groups. And so you wonder why. I wonder what he wants the country under that Please, can we pull up that image again? Yeah. Under the amber, to address certain concerns, 60 days to address concerns. So these concerns,
so
or yellow.
Zimbabwe is one of those countries.
Yes, countries,
and he's saying that he would like, for Zimbabwe, he would like us to be more stringent with how we issue our passports, because there are accusations that the Zimbabwean passport has become very easy to buy. So those who are banned are now coming to some of these countries, like Malawi as well, to buy those passports.
Thank you for that, because
too.
I think the same would apply to St. Kitts and Nevis,
Yes.
St. Lucia, and those Caribbean countries. You know, what has become very popular in recent times is investment visas. And some of them, I recall that someone had said his experience at border control in the United States was when he had given one of these Caribbean countries visas, and they asked, how did you get this? And he said, by investment. And so you're absolutely right. So people have been able to bypass, countries that come under maybe even the red, bypass by getting or obtaining these visas. And so maybe a stricter, passports, maybe a stricter process to ensure that this isn't done. I don't know if a lot of people want to get a Nigerian passport, because I don't know how many places we can go to with that. At the moment, things would get better. But it would be interesting to see if he would pass this, and to see if any of the countries would retaliate in terms of reciprocity. But moving over to that, I was quite concerned over the weekend to see that despite the federal court ruling, President Trump was still adamant about going ahead with enacting a 1798 Alien Enemies Act that was last used during the Second World War. And he said it was because that the Tren do Aragua were perpetuating, attempting, and threatening an invasion of predatory incursioning against the territory of the United States. When the court ruling, in fairness, when the court ruling was given, when the judge gave the court ruling, the plane had already taken off. However, the judge did say that any plane that was, I found that interesting even before Trump came out to speak, even if they were already airbound, they should turn around and come back to the United States of America. But this hasn't happened. I don't know how he's going to justify this. One of the things that we know is the bastion of U.S. democracy is the respect for the rule of law. And so he might not be very popular with this move because he's been blocked on many of his, on many of his executive orders by the courts. And so let's see how this will work out. You can understand his stance in terms of wanting to do away. This was one of his campaign promises, these terrorist groups, and he's come really hard on them. However, in the United States of America, it's not about what you say during campaign. It's not about your executive orders. The rule of law has a very strong role to play, and that's a nation where they actually obey. So let's see how he's going to get out of this one. But at the moment they've gone, he said they've already gone to their country, so there's nothing they can do about it, that he's already deported them back to the country.
Okay, so when you bring forward Trump's story, what screams at me is hypocrisy. The same President Trump, with all of this proposed visa ban, I must have to add it's proposed because he's not signing it into law, and probably based on the intelligence that New York Times did get it, but we'll scrutinize it because it's not been signed into law. The same President Trump that said it's so easy to get other countries' visa and they should look at their visa systems in the case of Zimbabwe, for instance. He's the same man that wants to sell American passport for as much as $5 million. That's the same man. So I can probably wing it, go through a very nefarious way to be able to get this. Because he says he's also going to be opened to people from other parts of the world, like Russia and the likes. So this is the same man, like Rasul says, wants to do selective race theory. And Rasul was totally right. You see, you know what hurt the Americans? Was because Rasul put a finger on exactly what Trump is doing. And I'll tell you historically what's always been done. When Hitler wrote Mein Kampf in the 30s, the first approach then was to be able to demonize a race with a lot of eugenics theory, that some races are not good enough, and they feel those races are threats to them. The next attempt was use of media. Only yesterday, I was researching and I discovered that even Henry Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company, started a newspaper called The Airborne Independent, where he was spreading anti-Jewish propaganda. Then they infiltrated the system. That was the third thing Hitler did. They bought senators over in America like Lyndon. They had somebody that will disburse money to the Americans and the Senate and the American political ecosystem called VERIC. And they spent a lot of money in anti-war propaganda in America. And that's exactly what Trump is doing in relation to the Heritage Foundation Project 2025. What Trump is attacking is DEI. Remove opportunities from minority groups so that there can be a supremacy of white people. And it's obvious. We have seen how all of this right-wing agenda play. The script is the same everywhere, from Hitler to Ceausescu, to name it. They first bring out a slant of nationalism. And that's what is really paining Rubio, because nobody nailed it like Ibrahim Rasool. That's exactly what they do, and it's a systematic attempt. They get on the bandwagon of nationalism. They say, oh, this is for my country. They use words like America First. Hope you know, America First, Trump is not just using that word. America First used to be a prominent right-wing group in the 30s. So it is deliberate that he's using that word, just like groups like the Silver Shirts, just like groups like the KKK. And that's why a lot of people are saying that you are going to have a depletion of rights and freedoms. That's why America, that is known to be a bastion of free speech, the student that protested in favor of Palestine has been jailed and incarcerated. So America is fast becoming an unsafe place. The next attempt they would do is to limit this influx from countries. That's the next approach they are doing. Probably Russia is just on the list, because they want to be politically correct. The next attempt they will do is to now start stifling the way of life and the way people live. And that's all what he's been doing with all of these things. So we have seen this script play out many times before. Hitler played it out. For further reading, please, you can go and check John Roge's reports. It's a book on Amazon, costs about over $120, and see how they perpetrated this propaganda. And they will use every means to do it. So this is Project 2025 in full swing. We are not surprised. Welcome to the new dawn of the world. But I know this too shall pass.
Absolutely. I know a lot of people also saying that the fight with South Africa is all about
Palestine
trying to
too.
save face
Israel.
from what happened at the International Court. Well, let's see how it plays out, because, of course, we know that South Africa is a firm ally of Russia, and some people are saying this may be BRICS related as well. Let's see how it's all managed. And, of course, we're still counting down to November when South Africa will be hosting the G20 summit. We want to see if Donald Trump will come to South Africa for the G20 summit. But let's now move on to news headlines from the front pages of our newspapers. We begin at home with This Day newspaper, a newspaper of record, which of course is leading with Fubara, frustrating budget presentation, 27 lawmakers claim as Rivers crisis festers. We've unpacked this in great detail early this morning. Above the masthead, Lamido to El Rufai, personal grievances should not be basis for Tinubu's removal. Those are the words of the former governor of Jigawa State, Alhaji Sule Lamido, who was saying that Malam El Rufai is being emotional in his current political takes, and is saying that that is not the best way to lead objectively. We'll now move over to Punch newspaper, and Punch leads with how subsidy removal and tension has worsened Niger's fuel scarcity. This is a deep dive into how neighboring Niger Republic has been impacted by changes in the petroleum sector in Nigeria. So they're saying the most filling stations in the capital, Niamey, have run dry and shut down completely. The report says that the nation depended on Nigeria for 50% of its local fuel supply, all of which was smuggled. So this has now put pressure on Niger's refinery to try and meet up with the required supply, and of course are struggling to do so because the report says the refinery can only do about 30 tankers of fuel per day, which is way below what Niger Republic needs. So some fallout from what we've seen with regards to deregulation of fuel here in Nigeria. Also on the front page of Punch is a story that I just want to quickly point out before we move on, which says governors are lobbying the president to block local government direct payment, report on Punch. So now we move to Daily Trust. So Daily Trust is also focusing on Niger Republic. It leads with a similar report on the impact of fuel deregulation in Nigeria to neighboring Niger Republic. And of course, there's so many things to unpack when we start thinking about the impact of what this means if Niger has a fuel crisis. Of course, we know the situation at the border, the bordering communities and so forth. So there's some conversations to be had about how this, the relationship between Nigeria and Niger, which seems to have really just paled in comparison to what it used to be, how we can restore relations with our largest land neighbor. Now to Guardian newspaper, where worries over sharp practices, abuse of free trade zone regulations fester. However, I want to take a political headline from the front page of The Guardian, which focuses on 2027. Wike, others affirm support for President Tinubu's second term amid growing opposition. Of course, we already saw that report from this day, which was unpacking Malam Al-Rufai's position. And so we're now seeing allegiances, shall we call it, aligning in the road to 2027. Some are pro-Tinubu and some are against him. Now to the Vanguard newspaper, which is focusing on exchange rate issues as the headline reads, Global Trade War. Naira value depreciates amid forex outflows. CBN intervenes with $500 million as Naira depreciates to 1,600. It says that BDCs are also lamenting about the scarcity of dollars as they allege that the banks are currently, excuse me, not selling to them.
Hello?
Thank you. Let's move over to The Nation in Kenya very quickly. The Nation in Kenya is taking a look at the state of the nation with regards to the economy, how jobs and pay crises have hit families. So it's an analysis of the economy under William Ruto, and it also looks at a report on how the big fish, as they're being called, are evading tax of up to 7 billion shillings. Now, we all know that the state of the economy, taxes, proposed changes to the tax system are what caused that massive uprising that we saw in Kenya last year, where the students and the youth took to the streets to protest. And it looks like the real central issues have yet to be resolved. Kenyans are also counting down to elections in 2027. So it would be interesting to see how all of these shifts and the deeper grappling economic situation will contribute towards the outcome of that election. Last but not least, The Guardian in the UK, it's all about economics and citizens continuing to ask for more from their governments, as there's The Guardian leads with a report on growing anger as Keir Starmer proposes £675 disability cuts. So this is part of the welfare cuts that could affect over 600,000 people, as of course the UK is doing all they can to try and balance the books. It's a global phenomenon now. Everybody is trying to balance their books.
I think Keir Starmer is in a very difficult position. He's moving away from traditional Labour ideology in terms of welfare. Labour is welfare, it's not mostly welfare. And so a lot of people, of course, are kicking against this. But he doesn't have money to execute the welfare state that currently exists in the UK. And so a number of cuts, and I still believe there'll be even more cuts to come. But let me come back to Nigerian politics. And going back to that headline from the Guardian newspaper that you highlighted, where politicking has started against 2027. And I think we've stated on this table a number of times that it's quite early, and the challenge with starting or bringing back the date of electioneering or politicking for the next cycle of elections is that it does affect governance. It does affect the government of the day to actually roll up their sleeves and get to work, because there's a lot of distraction currently with trying to grab 2027. Rather than talking about the challenges that we have currently before us, or even allowing the president to work and at least get some things done, he's now having to deal with, okay, my political opponents are now grouping and regrouping. Let's begin to work. And then we often talk about the costs of governance. If we push back the dates, it means you're going to have to spend a lot more money in terms of mobilization, lobbying, and all that. So it makes it even more expensive, and that's why I think it would be such a tragedy if we move back the dates and then we don't even allow, because we often say, 2 years for working. By the third, fourth year, they're already getting ready to go, to start politicking. So I think at the end of the day, it's the Nigerian people that will be disadvantaged if this trend continues. Meanwhile, the same newspaper also has a report that Pandef Youth leadership are saying that did you see that?
Yes.
Wike's actions will actually affect the president's ambitions in 2027 negatively. And if the president is if you want, he should make a move.
Wike's toxic
politics. That in the best interest of his ambitions for 2027, the president should relieve him of his duties as minister. I didn't say that. The Pandef Youth leadership have said, and they're asking Wike to apologize to all the elders and communities that he's insulted. And so they're saying that this is not the style of politicking that we want, or that he might actually do the opposite to the president's ambitions in 2027. So while he is saying that nobody will stop the president, maybe he's the one now that might stop the president.
It might not be in the papers, but I want to talk about the politicking that you talked about, the fact that people are not even doing enough, the politicians. And secondly, the fact that when you criticize them, you're being harassed. I was sad and taken aback by video of some official of the NYC calling up a girl, a lady, to tell her that she shouldn't have criticized the government. At first, you're a citizen before you join the NYC. You have a right to criticize. And all what she said is true. Lagos stinks. There's high inflation. Yes, I know the government have been doubting the narrative that food prices are coming down. Have they come back to the 2023 levels when this government came in? How much was rice in 2023 when this government came in? So these are the questions we should ask them. And when you hold them accountable, they start becoming frenetic. When you ask them, what have they done? They can't answer the question. For instance, tell me 100 achievements of this administration. What were the promises? There's a video making the rounds when it was said that if I don't restore power in 4 years, you should not give me a second term. Mm-hmm. What we need is the real impact in the lives of people. We campaign in poetry and we govern in prose. There's a difference between the campaign, the poetry time, and the prose where you actually get to do the work. What we should focus more is the work done. Yes, there's some successes, students' loan and all of that. The presidential initiative of CNG, how pervasive has been the adoption of CNG? From Buhari's time, they said they wanted about 5 million CNG cars on the road. How many cars have CNGs today? What's even the availability threshold of CNG? How many CNG stations are there? So these are the numerous questions we ask them, and we want accountability. That's just all. Citizens will speak in the government.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Accountability, accountability, accountability. Thank you so much, Bimbai. You're still here with us.
Working hard on a Monday.